As you look at it and heard what Janet Yellen had to say, she said, Janet Yellen, President Biden and I are very aware of how much debt we have, and we're very cognizant of that, but at the same time, we can't afford not to do that. What's your take on it?
Well, I think she's right. You need to go big right now. The economy is still in serious trouble. And once again, the people are getting hit the hardest are low income, low middle income families, and the lion's share of the assistance. You've got supplemental unemployment, you've got direct household payments. I think that's money well targeted and needs to be spent. Families need help; they're still struggling, and so I agree with her.
Targeting, we talk about targeting a lot. Republicans talk about it.
Right.
We never seem to quite get there. I mean, as a practical matter, even the PPE and things like that, it appears that it's going to the top, not the bottom. What can we do better to make sure it does get to the people who need it?
Well, I think the shift to fiscal away from monetary policy is hugely important. Notably, this $1.9 trillion does not include additional money to, backstop the Fed with its interventions. The Fed's just not equipped to get money to Main Street. They put money into financial markets. Wall Street's been doing really, really well since the great financial crisis. Not so much for that lower 80%, really. The people who work for a living and rely on labor income, not investment income, to live. So just shifting back to fiscal, that's a much better approach to get money actually in the hands of families. And, direct payments is a very efficient way to get money out quickly, which is really what we need to do. You don't need a lot of bureaucracy. There's there's all this debate about whether people earn it or not or deserve it. I look at all the trades that have gone to Wall Street, and I kind of have disdain for that. The lower 80% of the population, which is where these payments will reach, they've not done so well, right? It took them 10 years to recover. They were finally just catching up, and we have this hit. So I think there's some inequities of the past being addressed with these payments as well. But at least we know where the money's going. It's going to households. They can spend it on consumption. They can pay rent. They can pay their bills. They can save some of it. They can buttress their emergency savings. Again, I think that's money well spent.
So one of the things that this pandemic has really exposed is some of the racial and economic injustice across the country. The Black communities and the Hispanic communities, and for that matter, the Native American communities have really been particularly hard hit. Is there anything that either the Fed or the Congress can do to really readjust that, to really target the assistance for the people that really need it? That is to say, the minority communities.
Yeah. So there's a lot of structural bias in our system. We need to, fundamentally rethink policy. So the way, for instance, banking, my neck of the woods, the way we think about risk and risk weight, bank capital requirements, there's a lot of racial bias built into the assumptions that we use. So I think that's another area where I hope Janet Yellen will take a fresh look. I hope the Fed and other bank regulators will take a fresh look. How we think about credit, I think there's a lot of systemic bias. And there's one example of where policy generally can have, things that we're not even aware of, should be aware of, but have not been. So that, in addition to then just focusing on low income families where unfortunately minorities are disproportionately represented, I fear we're going to have we're going to be worsening our structural unemployment problem. Labor force participation is down again. Job retraining, job growth, wage growth, job retraining. I'm for, some kind of universal basic income to provide some type of, base support for working families. When we get through cycles like this, they've got something automatically to fall back on. There are a whole host of things. Let's face it, working families have been ignored by both parties for way too long. And so I'm hoping that Mr. Biden and Janet Yellen and others of his team are really going to be refocused on this, and I think they are.
Sheila, one of the things that you focused on during the great financial crisis was really the safety and security of our financial system. As we go through this crisis and you look from the outside now, do you see places that you're concerned about the financial system?
I do. I think the unbanked sector, the non-bank sector is a continuing source of turmoil. And last March, we had market disruptions. Same suspects, right? Money market funds, highly leveraged hedge funds, levered corporate ETFs. The Fed, again, had to come in and provide a lot of liquidity, a lot of bailouts. Whether that was right or not, I don't know. I do know that when we resort to bailouts as opposed to using regulation to prevent these unstable structures to begin with, we just reinforce risky, bad behavior. So we need to fish or cut bait, stop the bailouts, let them go down, let the market punish them, do away with them, or start providing some meaningful prudential supervision to prevent these unstable structures from proliferating. maybe some combination of both. But the unbanked sector, excuse me, I think it's the unbanked, non-bank sector is definitely an area of continued financial fragility. And I think, again, Janet Yellen, as chair of the Financial Stability Oversight Council, which has the authority, the cross-cutting regulatory authority to deal with this, I hope will be a high priority for her as well.
So during the great financial crisis, I keep going back to, we talked about being too big to fail as a bank. When you talk about money market funds, they may not be too big, but might they be too vital to the ongoing success of the financial system? Can you really allow them to fail given their central role in the system?
Well, look, I think there are a lot of different ways that financial institutions can fund themselves that are not as volatile as short-term, as these, these highly short-term fundings. There's still too much reliance on short-term funding. I look at more from the investor and customer perspective. I think money market funds that look, if money market funds want to hold themselves out, and let's face it, they still do. Your principal is protected. It's money good, just the way it is in a bank. Then they need some kind of bank-like regulations to require them to hold capital against that implicit guarantee, or make them invest in things where the principal is really protected, like short-term government securities. The funds that invested in federal securities did fine. It was the prime funds that invest in more volatile assets where we had problems. So, no, I think there is a solution other than serial bailouts of money market funds. And again, if they want to have this implicit guarantee, put some of your own money behind it.